hidden photo in her mother's diary reveals the doctor's secret past. When she opened her eyes in the hospital, the only thing she remembered was the doctor standing before her. But what if a photo hidden for years reveals the doctor's secret past? Soon you'll learn about the reality of a photo that fell out of her mother's diary and the deleted files. Don't forget to like the video that will lead Camila to a truth that has been hidden for years, and comment on the story. Let's begin. The sound of the machines in the room was constant. The beep of the heart monitor echoed in the room, mixed with the strong smell of medicine and disinfectant. Camila slowly opened her eyes. The white light of the hospital was too intense for her still blurry vision. Everything seemed distant, as if she were adrift between sleep and reality. Her body ached, not just any pain, but a deep pain that came from every bone and every muscle, as if she had been crushed. She blinked several times, trying to understand. Where was she? Her heart raced. There was a strange feeling inside her, a fear mixed with confusion. What had happened? Her chest rose and fell rapidly, and she was short of breath. Then a face appeared in her field of vision, an older man with well-combed gray hair, dressed in a white coat. There was a serious and experienced look about him, but at the same time, a shadow of concern. He approached slowly, watching her closely. "You're awake," he said in a calm tone, trying to sound reassuring. Camila looked at him, studying every detail of his face. Her heart beat faster. There was something familiar about him, something she couldn't explain. Her chest tightened, and before she could think, the words simply came out of her mouth in a trembling whisper. "Grandfather?" The doctor frowned and froze for a moment, as if he had received an unexpected blow. His eyes showed surprise, but he quickly recovered. "What did you say?" His voice had a mixture of disbelief and discomfort. Camila tried to move, but the pain made her let out a weak moan. Her head felt heavy, as if everything was spinning, but inside her, there was a certainty, something that came from a place much deeper than memory. She didn't understand why, but she knew that the man in front of her was her grandfather. "You are my grandfather." Her voice came out firmer, but still fragile, like someone struggling with confusion. The doctor took a step back. His gaze became more serious, and he shook his head slowly, trying to understand what was happening. "I think you're confused, miss. My name is Dr. Santiago Valdez. I'm a doctor at this hospital, but I'm not your grandfather." Camila felt anguish rise in her chest. Tears began to well up in her eyes. "No, I know it's you," she insisted, feeling a lump in her throat. "I'm sorry." Santiago looked at her for a few more seconds. Something inside him trembled. Those eyes. There was something in them that made him swallow hard, but it couldn't be. He had never seen this young woman before. He had no grandchildren. He was sure of that. Then why was it affecting him so much? He took a step back, feeling his mouth go dry. He needed to get out of there. He needed to breathe. "You were in an accident. Maybe you're confused," he said, trying to convince himself that was all it was. But Camila didn't seem convinced. On the contrary, her eyes filled with even more tears. "You're lying to me." Her voice broke, and her chest rose and fell rapidly, as if she were fighting something bigger than herself. That question took Santiago by surprise. He closed his eyes for a moment and took a deep breath. No, he wasn't lying. Before he could say anything else, a nurse entered the room with a folder in her hands. "Doctor, we need your reports for the emergency room." Santiago took a moment to respond, his eyes still fixed on the young woman in front of him, as if trying to figure her out. Then he took a deep breath and walked away. "I'll come back later to see how you are," he said in a now colder voice, trying to maintain a professional demeanor. Camila watched him leave, a tear rolling down her cheek. Her heart told her that he was her grandfather, but then why was he looking at her that way, as if he wanted to run away from her? Camila tried to recover the memories that seemed to be trapped somewhere dark inside her mind. She closed her eyes tightly, as if that would help her remember, but all she found was a great emptiness. Her chest rose and fell desperately. Her name, her age, simple things like the scent of her mother's perfume or the taste of her favorite food, everything seemed distant, blurred. The only thing that lingered inside her like an insistent echo was that strange and inexplicable feeling that the doctor who had just left the room was her grandfather. She sobbed, feeling her heart tighten. What was happening? Why was her mind like this? Why was it so difficult to remember? A nurse entered the room when she heard her crying and approached slowly, trying to calm her down. "You're safe, dear. Take a deep breath. Everything will be fine." But how could everything be fine? She didn't know who she really was. She didn't know where the people she loved were, or even if anyone was waiting for her. Fear was suffocating her. "I don't remember," she said weakly, almost in a whisper. "I don't remember anything." The nurse exchanged a sad glance with another colleague standing nearby. "This sometimes happens after a trauma like the one you suffered. Your body is recovering. Your mind also needs time. You'll see that you'll be fine soon. It's perfectly normal." Camila looked at the white hospital ceiling, trying to hold back her tears. The sound of the machines around her now seemed distant. "But I remember him," she murmured. "That doctor. I know he's my grandfather." The nurse frowned, not understanding. "Dr. Santiago." Camila nodded, wiping her tears with her trembling hands. "I don't know how to explain it, but I feel like it's him, even though I don't remember my past, even though my mind is confused. That certainty doesn't leave my heart." The nurse sighed and adjusted the sheets around her, trying to offer her some comfort. "Dr. Santiago is a good man, but he doesn't have any grandchildren." Camila closed her eyes. For a moment, something inside her told her that wasn't true. "I need to talk to him. I need to understand." The nurse touched her shoulder gently. "He's busy right now, but he'll come later." "Okay, first you have to rest. Your body has been through a lot." Santiago walked quickly through the hospital corridors, but his mind was trapped in that young woman's room. He tried to push away the strange feeling that filled his chest. He tried to convince himself that it was all just confusion caused by the accident. But the more he tried, the harder it was to ignore the impact of that scene. "You are my grandfather." Camila's words echoed like a bell in his head. Her face, her gaze, that insistence full of emotion. Why did it affect him so much? When his shift ended, Santiago went straight home. He lived in a spacious but quiet apartment, where only the sound of footsteps could be heard on the wooden floor. Upon entering, he took off his gown and threw it on the couch. "Dad," Valeria's voice came from the kitchen. His daughter, a 35-year-old woman, appeared, drying her hands with a kitchen towel. "You got home late today. Everything okay?" Santiago ran his hands over his face as if trying to shake off his fatigue. "It was just a difficult day." Valeria frowned. "A complicated case?" He hesitated for a moment. The image of Camila appeared in his mind, but he pushed it away. "Just confused patients." Valeria didn't insist. She walked over to him and put a gentle hand gently on his shoulder. "You work too hard. You need to rest." Santiago smiled, but it was a tired, almost forced smile. "You worry too much." He walked away and went to the window. Outside, the city continued to pulsate with lights and movement, but his thoughts were far from there. The next day, when he arrived at the hospital, he realized he couldn't avoid that conversation. Camila insisted on seeing him. She entered the room, and before he could say anything, she looked at him with eyes full expectation. "You came." Her voice sounded firmer, like someone who had waited a long time. Santiago crossed his arms, maintaining a professional tone. "I'm a doctor. It's my job." Camila pressed her lips together. "You know it's not just that." He took a deep breath. He needed to end this story before it grew any further. "I'm not your grandfather, young lady," he said firmly. "I only have one daughter who lives with me. I don't have any grandchildren." Camila's heart sank. She wanted to believe that it was all a mistake, but something inside her told her that he was wrong. "What if you're the one who's wrong?" Her voice was fragile but full of hope. Santiago's expression hardened. "I know my own life. I'm sure I don't have any grandchildren. Valeria, my daughter, never had children." But as he said that, a feeling of unease grew inside him, because at that moment something hit him like a punch. Her eyes, the way she looked at him, something about her felt familiar. Something squeezed his chest in a way he couldn't explain. He looked away and cleared his throat, trying to regain control of the situation. "I'm sorry for what happened to you, but I can't give you an answer that doesn't exist." Camila looked down, feeling a lump in her throat. "Then why do I feel it? Because even though I don't remember anything, my heart is sure that you are my family." Santiago didn't answer. He just took a deep breath and stood up. Rest. This will pass. He left the room without looking back, but as he closed the door, his chest ached in a way he couldn't explain. Something inside him told him that this story was far from over. The day passed slowly. Camila stared at the hospital ceiling, trying to organize her thoughts. Everything inside her screamed that Santiago was her grandfather, but he denied it. What was true? Was it just a mistake made by her mind, damaged by the accident? At the end of the afternoon, a nurse entered the room with an object in her hands. It was an old notebook with a worn cover, some pages missing, and a faint smell of old paper. "We found this inside the car you were in," said the nurse, placing the notebook on the bed. "It seems important." Camila looked at the notebook, feeling her heart beat faster. She didn't know that the notebook she always saw with her mother was in the car. With trembling hands, she took the object and opened it slowly. The handwriting on the pages was soft but firm, and as soon as she read the first words, her chest tightened. It was her mother's handwriting. Tears came before she could understand what was written. Each line brought a mixture of pain and nostalgia. Her mother couldn't remember her face, but she could feel her presence there in that notebook. It was as if each word carried a piece of the love she had left behind. She turned a few pages, taking deep breaths, until a sentence immediately caught her attention. Her hands clutched the paper tighter, and her heart raced. "When I am no longer here, or you need help with something serious and have no other option, look for Santiago Valdez. That is the name of your grandfather, the one in the photo I showed you when you were a child. But I don't know how he will react. Be careful." Camila's breathing became uneven, and her eyes scanned those words several times, as if to make sure she was reading correctly. Santiago Valdez, the name of the doctor, the man who looked her in the eyes and told her he wasn't her grandfather, but her mother said otherwise. A chill ran through her body. Had Santiago lied? Or did he really not know? Why did her mother write, "I don't know how he'll react"? What did that mean? Camila closed the diary against her chest, feeling her heart beat strongly. She knew nothing about her life before the accident, but now she was certain of one thing. Santiago Valdez was hiding a truth that she needed to discover. Santiago was sitting in his small office inside the hospital. The room was tidy, with shelves full of medical books and a few scattered photo frames. But there was a void there, something he was trying to hide, even from himself. It had been a long day, but his mind would not give him any rest. He squeezed a pen between his fingers, lost in his own thoughts. Ever since he left Camila's room, a restlessness had settled inside him. He wanted to ignore it, but something inside him wouldn't let him. He got up, went to the window, and looked out at the illuminated city, but his mind was still trapped in the past. He tried to convince himself that Camila was wrong, that it was just a delusion caused by the accident. But then, why did he feel that pain in his chest every time he looked those eyes? Camila was sitting on the hospital bed. Her mother's diary was open on her lap. The pages were worn from time, with some stains showing that it had been leafed through many times. Every word written there seemed like a bridge between the present and the past, as if her mother were trying to talk to her. From somewhere far away, she took a deep breath, turning the pages slowly, feeling a knot in her stomach, a mixture of fear and expectation. Then something slipped out of the diary and fell onto the sheet, a photograph. Camila picked up the photo with trembling hands. The paper was yellowed with worn edges. The image was no longer very clear, but she could clearly see a young man holding a baby in his arms. Camila's heart raced. Her eyes scanned every detail of the image, and then she recognized the man, Santiago. Her chest tightened. There was no doubt. The man in the photo, with his serious expression and deep gaze, was the same doctor who had denied being her grandfather. She ran her fingers over his face in the photo, as if that could bring her some answers. And the baby would be her? No, it couldn't be. If Santiago was her grandfather, that meant the baby could only be her mother. Tears began to fall without her realizing it. Her mother, Helena, in Santiago's arms. But he said he had no grandchildren. He said that Valeria was his only daughter. Then why did that photo exist? Camila closed her eyes, trying to contain the pain that was growing inside her. Her mother wasn't there to explain it to her. The only person who could answer was Santiago, but he seemed determined to run away from the truth, holding the photo tightly. She made a decision. No matter what she had to do, she was going to find out the whole truth. Her heart was beating so fast that she felt her chest rise and fall at a rapid pace. She could no longer lie there waiting for the answers to simply appear. Not after everything she had seen in the newspaper. Not after that photo. With difficulty, she got out of bed. Her body still ached from the accident, but the pain that weighed most heavily on her was the uncertainty. She needed to see Santiago. She needed to look him in the eyes and demand the truth. Dragging the IV stand beside her, she left the room. The hallways were bustling with activity. Nurses rushing by, patients talking in low voices. But she didn't care. The only thing that mattered at that moment was finding Santiago. When she reached the door to his office, she didn't hesitate. She knocked firmly, then again, louder. This time, the door opened slowly, and Santiago appeared on the other side. His expression immediately turned serious when he saw her there, pale and tired, holding a piece of past in her hands. "What are you doing out of your room?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady, but there was a slight tremor in it. Camila didn't answer right away. She just held up the photo for him to see. "You lied to me." Santiago looked at the photo. His blood ran cold for a moment. It seemed as if time had stopped. His eyes were fixed on that image. He saw himself younger, holding a baby. He felt his breathing become heavy, as if the air had suddenly become denser. "Where did you get this?" he asked, almost in a whisper. Camila swallowed. "It was in my mom's diary. She wrote that if I ever needed help, I should look for you. She said you're my grandfather." Santiago closed his eyes for a moment, a deep pain crossing his face. "Why did you lie?" She interrupted him, her voice breaking. "Why did you pretend that I didn't know you?" Santiago rubbed his forehead as if trying to organize his thoughts. "I didn't lie. I didn't know." Camila felt her eyes burn. "How could you not know? You held my mom in your arms when she was a baby. You're her dad." Santiago took a step back. "I can't." "Yes, you can. You owe me," she shouted, feeling anger mixed with tears stuck in her throat. "I lost my mom. I lost my memory. I don't know where I come from, and now I find out that you're in the middle of all this, and you just want to ignore it." Santiago looked at her, and for a moment, Camila saw something different in his eyes. It was pain. It was guilt. She took a deep breath and ran her hands over her face. "I don't know where to start. From the beginning?" she asked, her voice now lower, but still trembling. "Please." Santiago hesitated. Part of him wanted to keep denying it. He wanted to bury that past once and for all. But that girl in front of him, her eyes so similar to Elena's, he could no longer run away. He took a chair and sat down, his shoulders slumped as if he were defeated. "I did things that I regret to this day, Camila." She felt her chest tighten. "Then tell me about it. Let me decide how to deal with it." Santiago looked at the photo once more. He took a deep breath. His chest tightened. The air became heavy. It had been years, many years, since he had uttered that name. He had been trying for a long time to bury it in the past, as if that were possible, to erase everything that had happened. But now that name came back like a ghost. He closed his eyes and felt his heart beating fast. A memory came back with force, as if it were happening at that very moment. He saw a dark-haired girl running through the yard of his old house. Her laughter was clear, full of life. "Daddy, catch me!" she shouted, and he ran after her, laughing too, but the scene changed. The laughter turned to screams. He saw Elena, now older, with tears in her eyes, looking at him with anger and pain. "You lied to me my whole life. You destroyed my life." Santiago opened his eyes suddenly, breathing deeply, as if he had just awakened from a nightmare. He ran his hand over his face, trying to compose himself. "Where is she?" Camila insisted. Santiago looked away, tears already running down his face. "I don't know," Camila laughed. "Not funny. You don't know. I think you do. I think you know much more than you're saying." Santiago closed his eyes wearily. "I lost her many years ago. I don't know where she is." Camila crossed her arms. "Then why did they delete her hospital records?" Santiago's body tensed. "What? She was here?" I went to look for my mother's medical records. I know she was here before she disappeared, but it's as if she never existed. The files are gone. Don't you find that strange, Dr. Santiago? He took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. I have no idea what you're talking about. Camila clenched her fists. You can lie to me, but you can't run away from the truth forever. I'm going to find out what happened. She took the diary from the table and left, leaving Santiago alone with the faded photo still in front of him. He ran his hand over his face, trying to shake off the feeling that something much bigger was behind all this. He needed to be sure. He walked down the hallways with a weight on his chest that he couldn't feel. For years, he had needed answers. He needed to understand how Elena, his adopted daughter, had completely disappeared from the records, as if she had never existed. He went to the medical records department. He knew some of the older nurses who had worked there for decades, and who might be able to help him. At the counter, he found Doña Teresa, a gray-haired nurse with an ever-attentive gaze. She was one of the oldest in the hospital, someone who had seen everything in that place. Santiago looked up when he saw her. He hesitated for a moment. What he was about to ask could open wounds that had never healed, but he no longer had a choice. I need information about an old case from more than 20 years ago. His voice came out a little hoarse. About a patient named Elena. Doña Teresa was silent for a few seconds. Santiago noticed that her hands, which had been leafing through some papers, stopped moving. Elena, his voice lowered. He nodded slightly. The woman looked away, pretending to search for something among the papers. It's been so long. I don't know if we have anything on file. But why are you asking about this now? Because Camila... He took a breath before continuing. Camila is your daughter. Teresa's eyes immediately widened in surprise. My God! Santiago noticed something in her face. It wasn't just surprise. It was also fear. I need to know what happened to Elena. Teresa shook her head nervously. There are records. Yes, a baby with that name, and yours too. She looked around as if to make sure no one was listening. She's your daughter, doctor. A chill ran through Santiago. Adoptive? Something that nervously. There are records, yes. A baby with that name, and yours too. She looked around as if to make sure no one was listening. Is she your daughter, doctor? A chill ran through Santiago. Yes, adopted. Something I did in the past and regret. But now that you have the full name, I need to know if in recent years you have treated anyone with that name here at the hospital. Teresa searched the computer for a moment, breathing deeply. I haven't found anything here. I can only tell you one thing, doctor. Curiosity will make people start asking questions about what's going on, but only you know what you did, and you must also have your reasons. I'm sure you made the decision you had to make. Those words hit him like a blow. Santiago felt his heart beating fast. But before he could ask anything else, Teresa turned and left, leaving him standing there with the feeling that he was about to discover something much bigger than he had imagined. Santiago stood in the hospital hallway, feeling a chill run down his spine. Teresa's words still echoed in his mind like thunder. You know what you did. He wanted to say. He didn't know. Something inside him was screaming, pulling up memories he had spent years trying to bury. He kept walking, lost in his own thoughts. Until he turned a corner, he heard a voice calling his name. Dr. Valdez stopped and turned around. It was Dolores, one of the oldest nurses at the hospital, who knew the whole truth about his life. A woman with white hair and hands wrinkled by time, but with a still sharp gaze. He didn't see her often. Now she worked in administration. Dolores took a few steps toward him, but first she looked around as if to make sure no one was listening. I heard you're asking about Elena. Her voice was low, almost a whisper. Santiago felt his heart beat faster. Yes, you remember her. Dolores pursed her lips with the heavy gaze of someone who has been carrying a secret for too long. How could he forget her? Santiago felt a lump in his throat. Dolores, what do you think happened to her? The nurse looked him straight in the eye, and what she said next made his blood run cold. Doctor, you were always a good doctor, but when it came to Elena, you made mistakes. Santiago felt a lump form in his throat. I tried to protect her, and by trying to protect her, you destroyed her life. Those words hit him like a punch. He felt his breathing quicken, his hands sweat. He wanted to deny it, to say that Dolores was wrong, but he couldn't. Where could she be now? He asked, almost without a voice. Dolores closed her eyes. For a moment, well, due to recent events, they say we have to be ready to face the truth, even if it's difficult. He opened his mouth to respond, but before he could say anything, Dolores walked away, leaving him alone in the hallway. The silence was deafening. The weight of the past fell upon him. We have to be ready to face the truth even if it's difficult. He opened his mouth to respond, but before he could say anything, Dolores walked away, leaving him alone in the hallway. The silence was deafening. The weight of the past fell on him like a strong tide, bringing to the surface something he didn't want to admit. He knew what he had done, and now it was perhaps too late to fix it. Santiago entered his office and slammed the door shut. His hands trembled. His chest rose and fell rapidly, as if he had run a long distance. But he hadn't run, not physically. What was happening was inside him. It was his heart and mind being dragged back to a past he had spent his life trying to forget. He slumped into his chair, running his hands over his face. Her name wouldn't leave his head. Helena. The years came back like a movie before his eyes. He saw himself younger, holding a baby in his arms, the same girl in the photo Camila found in Elena's diary, small and fragile with those big eyes full of life. She was just a baby when she came to him, and from the first day, Santiago knew he would do anything to protect her. Time passed. He raised her with all the love he could give her. He taught her to ride a bike, took care of her wounds, and was with her on her first days of school. To him, Helena was his daughter. It didn't matter that they weren't related by blood. But then the years passed. She grew up, and with adolescence came the questions. Santiago never wanted to hide the truth, but he didn't know how to tell her. After a fight, everything came out in the worst possible way. He remembered that moment, as if he were still there. "You can't choose my future for me. You're not God, you're just my dad," Elena shouted, her eyes shining with rage. "I'm not," he replied, as furious as she was. Silence filled the room. Santiago's chest rose and fell heavily. Helena looked at him, filled with pain, and then, in an impulse she would regret for the rest of her life, she said the words that destroyed her. "You're adopted." Elena blinked as if she had been slapped in the face. Santiago knew at that moment that he had made a terrible mistake, but it was too late. "What?" Her voice was weak, almost breathless. She tried to get closer, but she backed away. "Elena, listen, I never wanted you to find out this way. I am adopted," she repeated, as if still trying to understand. The silence was confirmation. That night, she left home and never returned. Santiago tried to find her. He searched records, called acquaintances, followed any lead that might give him an answer, but Helena simply disappeared, as if she had never existed. Now, decades later, Camila appeared before him with the same questions, with the same look as Elena, and he finally understood that the past could not be buried. While Santiago relived all of that, Camila, on the other side of the hospital, clung to her mother's diary as if it were her only link to the truth. She spent the night rereading every word, trying to piece together a puzzle of which she only had a few pieces. And then, there it was, written in nervous handwriting, as if it had been scribbled in a moment of desperation. "I left because he told me the truth in a cruel way. Cruel way because that day I discovered that my life was a lie." Camila felt a lump in her throat. Her mother ran away at 17 because she discovered that she was not Santiago's biological daughter, because he hurt her with his words. Now everything made sense. Santiago did not deny being her grandfather because she did not know. He denied it because guilt consumed him. Camila closed her eyes and whispered softly, "Mom, I'm going to find out everything." As soon as she left the hospital, she was determined to find concrete evidence. She could no longer live with assumptions. She needed to see it with her own eyes. Her first stop was the city's civil registry office. The place was old, with shelves full of files and employees who seemed to live buried in paperwork. Camila approached the counter, her hands sweaty. "I need a copy of my birth certificate. My name is Camila Ortega." The receptionist, a woman with glasses and hair pulled back in a bun, asked no questions. She simply requested the necessary documents and returned a few minutes later with a sheet of paper yellowed by time. Camila took the paper with some hesitation. Her heart skipped a beat when her eyes fell on the document. She felt her stomach churn. The mother field was filled in. Elena Ortega. But in the father field, there was only a blank space. Camila's throat felt dry. "Is this correct?" she asked, her voice trembling. The woman at the counter glanced quickly at the document and shrugged. "If that's what's in the registry, it means your mother didn't declare your father's name." Camila looked down at the paper. This only confirmed what she already feared. Her mother never said who her father was. But why? Who was he? What happened that his name was never registered? She left the civil registry with an even heavier weight on her chest. Now, on top of everything else, she had another piece of the puzzle that didn't fit. She walked aimlessly through the crowded streets of Los Angeles, trying to organize her thoughts. But something inside her told her that there was still much more to discover. Then a chill ran down her spine. She felt that someone was watching her. She stopped in the middle of the sidewalk and discreetly looked around. People were walking normally, some talking on the phone, others carrying shopping bags. But there was something, an uneasiness, a strange feeling she couldn't ignore. She kept walking, now paying more attention to her surroundings. She passed a shop window, and in the reflection of the glass, she saw a man standing across the street. He didn't seem to be doing anything suspicious, but his gaze was fixed on her. Camila tried to ignore him. Maybe it was just paranoia. After everything she was going through, it was natural to feel insecure. But then she turned a corner, and a few minutes later, she discreetly looked back. The man was still there. Her heart raced. She quickened her pace, turned another corner, and entered a small cafe, trying to throw him off the trail. She stayed inside for a few minutes, peering out the window. The man crossed the street, looked both ways, and finally continued walking until he disappeared into the crowd. Camila let out a long sigh. Maybe she was imagining things. Maybe he was just a stranger, anyone. But deep down, something told her that the shadow following her had something to do with her past, and with the truth she still didn't know. Santiago spent the whole day with his head stuck in that discovery. Elena's records had simply disappeared. There was no trace of her time at the hospital, not even on the day Camila was born. It was as if someone had erased her existence, as if she had never been there. But he knew the truth. He was there. He saw it with his own eyes. At the end of the afternoon, Santiago was leaving the hospital when he heard a voice calling him. Dr. Valdez turned and saw Isabel, a nurse who had been working at the hospital for many years. She had a worried expression, as if she wanted to say something but didn't know if she should. "Isabel, did something happen?" She looked around to make sure no one was listening, then gestured for him to follow her to an empty room. Santiago felt a chill down his spine. "Back. What's going on?" Isabel closed the door carefully and took a deep breath. "Before speaking, I heard several people asking about Elena Ortega in the medical records. They said you were looking for her." "Yes, I need any information I can get." Santiago's heart raced. "After I found out you were looking for her, I did some research." He leaned forward a little, anxious. "And what did you find out?" The nurse hesitated, as if she were afraid to say it out loud. "Doctor, Elena didn't run away." Santiago frowned. "What do you mean she didn't?" Isabel's eyes filled with tears. She was admitted here against her will. The ground seemed to disappear from under Santiago's feet. "Admitted?" Isabel nodded. "In the psychiatric ward. Many things are only recorded on paper for patient privacy." Santiago's heart was beating so hard he could hear it in his ears. "That doesn't make sense." "Yes, it does." Isabel interrupted him in a serious voice. "Because she never left here." Santiago felt a bitter taste in his mouth. "What do you mean by that?" Isabel swallowed before continuing. "I mean that your daughter didn't disappear." Those words hit him like a blow. Santiago was speechless, unable to react. She was saying that someone had her declared incompetent, crazy, and locked her up here for some reason. Santiago's eyes burned. His mind screamed that it couldn't be true, but his heart said otherwise. And for the first time, he realized that he might have made the worst mistake of his life. Camila spent hours rereading her mother's diary. Every word. It seemed like a whisper from the past, an echo of a story she didn't know, but now belonged to her, with the revelation that Elena didn't run away, but was taken from her. Her search for the truth became even more urgent. Turning the pages carefully, her eyes fell on something that caught her attention. A name, Salvador. The word appeared several times in the diary, scattered throughout the text, as if her mother were trying to remember someone, or wanted to make sure she didn't forget. Some phrases were scribbled, as if Elena had written them in a hurry, or out of desperation. Salvador always said he would find me. Salvador knows the truth. I can't let them take Salvador away from me too. They've already taken everything else from me. A chill ran through her body. Who was Salvador? The name sounded strong, important, as if it were the key to understanding everything that had happened. She closed the diary for a moment and brought her hands to her face. Her mother had been alone all this time. Salvador was a friend, a lover, someone who tried to help her, and he failed. If there was one person who knew what happened to Elena, that person was Salvador. Camila took a deep breath. Now she had to find him. Camila entered Santiago's office without touching his hands. They were shaking, and his chest was rising and falling rapidly. She held the diary tightly against her body, as if it were armor against everything she was about to face. Santiago, who was sitting behind the desk, looked up and saw her eyes full of pain, anger, and above all, a thirst for answers. "We need to talk," Camila said with a trembling but firm voice. He took a deep breath and stood up as if he already knew what was coming. "Camille, don't say my name," she interrupted him, her eyes filled with tears. Not as if nothing had happened. Santiago closed his eyes for a second. "I know you're angry." She let out a humorless laugh. "Angry? I'm devastated." Her voice broke, and she had to take a deep breath to continue. "I spent my whole life knowing nothing about my family, not knowing who my dad was. And who did that? It was you." Santiago remained silent. Camila shook her head in disbelief. "I want to see her. I want you to tell me what happened." He looked away, swallowing hard. The past was there, surrounding him, and he could no longer run away. He turned toward the window, looking at the bustling city outside. His voice came out low, laden with guilt. "I did something unforgivable to Camila." A chill ran down her spine. "What did you do?" Santiago ran his hand over his face, his eyes already shining with tears he would not let fall. "Helena, when she got pregnant, I thought I was ruining her life." Camila opened her eyes in surprise. "Mom got pregnant young, right?" Santiago nodded. "She was 17, she was in love. She said it was true love, but I couldn't accept it. I thought it was a mistake, that she didn't know what she was doing." Camila's heart raced. Who was the baby's father? Santiago closed his eyes for a moment before answering. "Salvador." Camila covered her mouth with her hands. He loved her with all his heart. The silence in the office became heavy. Camila took a deep breath, trying to hold back the tears. "And what did you do?" Santiago closed his eyes tightly, as if saying the words was too difficult. "I separated them." Those words fell like a stone on Camila's chest. How he looked at her, and finally let the tears escape. "I made Salvador believe that Elena didn't want to see him anymore. I made Elena believe that he had abandoned her." Camila brought her hands to her head, feeling a lump in her throat. "My God." Santiago took a deep breath as if each word weighed a ton. "Days later, we had the worst fight. I lost my mind. I told her she was adopted, and she left." Camila began to cry, shaking her head, refusing to believe it. "You destroyed her life. You took away the chance to be happy." Santiago lowered his head. "I thought I was protecting my daughter, but I only caused her pain." Camila looked at the man in front of her. For the first time, she didn't see just the cold and distant doctor. She saw a broken man, consumed by guilt. Santiago remained silent for a long time after Camila left the office. His hands were resting on the table, but he felt as if he didn't have the strength to stand. The weight of his own words still echoed in his mind. "I did something unforgivable." He tried to justify himself so many times. He tried to believe that he had done the best he could, that he only wanted to protect Helena from a difficult future. But now, seeing Camila in front of him, hearing the pain in her voice, noticing the look of sadness in her eyes, he understood. He had destroyed his own family. That night, Santiago couldn't sleep. He spent hours sitting on the couch in the living room, looking at an old picture frame. In it was Valeria, his biological daughter, the only one he still had close to him, But when he closed his eyes, the face that came to mind was not hers. It was Helena's, and now it was also Camila's, because Camila was Helena. The way she spoke, the sparkle in her eyes when she was determined about something, the way she crossed her arms when she got nervous. Every little detail reminded Santiago of the daughter he had lost. He got up and went to the mirror in the hallway. He looked at his own reflection, the tired face, the gray hair, the wrinkles marked by guilt and time. How much of himself had he lost over the years? The next day, he returned to the hospital, trying to keep himself busy, but his gaze was always searching for Camila. When he finally saw her, he felt a lump in his throat. She was standing talking to a nurse, gesturing with her hands in the same way Elena did when she tried to explain something with passion. The sparkle in her eyes was identical, the tone of her voice, the strength in her words. For a second, Santiago felt as if he were seeing Elena as a teenager back in the hospital, full of life and dreams before everything fell apart. Camila turned and caught his gaze. Santiago quickly looked away, but he knew she had noticed. He saw Elena in Camila, and for the first time, he understood that this was the cruelest pain of all, because now he knew he could never get back the time he had lost since leaving the hospital and starting to search for answers about his mother. Camila felt that the sensation of being followed was only increasing. At first, she thought it was paranoia, an effect of the fear and tension of the last few days, but now she was sure. She was walking down a busy street when she felt that heavy gaze on her again. She tried to hide it. She glanced quickly at her reflection in a shop window, and there he was, the same tall man with dark hair and a few gray strands, an unkempt beard, and a look that conveyed deep pain. He wasn't trying to hide, just watching her as if he were waiting for something. Camila's heart raced. She quickened her pace, turned a corner, and entered a small alleyway, leaning against the wall. She needed to breathe. She needed to think. But then, she heard footsteps approaching. She turned quickly, ready to run, but the man was already standing in front of her. Camila. The way he said her name made her shudder. There was emotion in his voice. "Who are you?" Her voice sounded firmer than she expected. He looked at her for a moment, as if trying to absorb every detail of her face, then took a deep breath and replied with a lump in his throat. "I'm Salvador." Camila felt a chill. That name, the name that was in her mother's diary, the name that Elena wrote down as someone important, someone who knew the truth. Salvador repeated, trying to understand. "You knew my mom?" The man's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't just know your mom. I loved her." Camila felt the air leave her. Salvador closed his eyes for a moment, as if gathering the strength to continue. "I'm your father." Camila's world stopped. She stared at him, unable to react. Her father, the man she never knew, the name that was never on her birth certificate, was right there in front of her. Tears began to well up in her eyes without her realizing it. It can't be. Salvador took a step forward, his eyes shining with emotion. "I've been looking for you my whole life." Camila felt her heart tighten. Now she finally had the chance to find out everything. Camila felt a lump in her throat. "This doesn't make sense." Her voice stuttered. "If you searched for me so much, why didn't you ever find me?" Salvador closed his eyes for a moment and shook his head. "Because they didn't let me." She frowned. "What do you mean they didn't let you?" He swallowed hard before continuing. "Your mother and I loved each other. When we found out she was pregnant, we made plans. We were going to be together, raise you, and start a family. But your father, Santiago, wouldn't allow it." Camila felt her chest tighten. Already knew that part of the story, but hearing it from Salvador, feeling the pain in his voice, made it even more real. "I tried to see her," he continued, his voice breaking. "At first I thought she was angry, that she needed time, but days passed, then weeks, and no one would let me near her. I went to her house and knocked on the door countless times, but they told me she didn't want to see me." Camila looked at him, feeling a mixture of anger and sadness. "And you believed them?" Salvador's eyes filled with pain. "Not at first, but then it got worse. One day I went to the hospital where I knew she was going for her checkups, and they told me she was gone, that she had disappeared and left me behind." Camila felt her stomach churn. "You never suspect anything." Salvador ran his hands over his face, visibly frustrated. I did everything I could. I went to the records office. I looked for mutual friends. I asked for help, but it was as if Elena had been erased from history, as if she had never existed. Camila's chest hurt. "Mom never ran away," she said, clenching her own hands to control the trembling. "She thought you had abandoned her, and she left to raise me alone. Years later, they committed her against her will and erased all her records." Salvador took a step back, as if he had been struck. "My God." Camila closed her eyes. "For a moment, everything they told you were lies." Salvador looked at her with a mixture of pain and fury. "He took them from me." Tears rolled down Camila's face. "And now we're going to fix this." For the first time, Salvador saw in Camila's eyes the same strength he had once seen in Helena. He was no longer alone. Now, together, they were going to find Elena. Santiago walked through the hospital with heavy steps, since he discovered that Elena never. His heart ached like never before. For years, he had lived trying to convince himself that he had done the right thing, that his actions were to protect his daughter. But now all he could see was the damage he had left behind. When he turned a corner, he felt his body freeze instantly. Standing there, looking directly at him, was Salvador. Time seemed to stand still. Santiago felt his blood run cold, and his heart beat so hard he could hear it in his own ears. It had been more than 20 years since he had, but he didn't need much time to recognize him. The look in his eyes was the same. Salvador took a few steps forward, his face full of pain and rage. "So we finally meet again," he said, his voice low but firm. Santiago took a deep breath, trying to stay calm, but inside he felt like he was falling apart. "What are you doing here?" Salvador let out a dry laugh, without a trace of humor. "What am I doing here?" he repeated incredulously. "All these years I wondered where Helena was, why she never looked for me, why she never let me at least meet my daughter. And now I find out it was you." Santiago lowered his head, unable to hold his gaze. "You separated me from the woman I loved," Salvador continued, his voice breaking. "You destroyed her life. You made her disappear. You made my daughter grow up without knowing I existed." Santiago closed his eyes for a moment, as if that could ease the pain, but it didn't. Nothing did. "I thought I was protecting Elena." "Protecting her," Salvador interrupted him with a laugh full of disbelief. "You destroyed your own daughter. You condemned her to a life of pain." Santiago looked up, and Salvador saw it. There, in the eyes of the doctor who had once taken away his happiness, there was regret. "I know," murmured Santiago, tears in his eyes. "I know what I did is unforgivable." Salvador felt his chest rise and fall as he struggled to control his rage. "Where is she?" Santiago ran his hands over his face, feeling the weight of guilt crushing him. "I don't know." Salvador took a step closer, staring at him. "You're going to help us find her." Santiago raised his head. Camila was right behind Salvador, her eyes shining with excitement and expectation. Santiago looked at them both and felt a deep pain. He had destroyed that family, but maybe he could still do something to fix it. He took a deep breath and said in a firm voice, "We'll find her together." Silence hung heavy in the air. Santiago brought his hands to his face, and for the first time, Camila saw something she never imagined she would see in that man. He was crying. "I know I can't change what I did," he said, his voice trembling. "I know it's too late to ask for forgiveness." Camila closed her eyes tightly, letting the tears flow. "It's too late for my mom, but for me, how do I go on after this?" Santiago lifted his face and looked at her with eyes full of tears. "By finding your mother and letting me help them." Camila remained silent. Her mind screamed at her not to trust him, but deep down, a part of her knew that Santiago was truly sorry. She took a deep breath, feeling her chest ache. "Then help me fix this." Santiago's eyes shone with painful relief. Maybe he could never forgive himself, but at that moment, Camila gave him one last chance to do something right. Santiago, Camila, and Salvador were sitting in a small room inside the hospital. The air felt heavy, as if it carried the weight of years of poorly buried secrets. Isabel, the nurse who had told them about Elena's hospitalization, stood in front of them, visibly nervous. Her hands trembled as she held a worn folder that looked like it had been taken from a place where no one should be. "I shouldn't be doing this," she muttered, looking around as if afraid someone would hear her. Camila leaned forward with pleading eyes. "Please, Isabel. I just want to know where my mom is." The nurse closed her eyes for a moment and took a deep breath before finally opening the folder. Inside were some notes, loose pages, papers yellowed by time. Elena's name had disappeared from the medical records. "You already know that, but I was looking through old files in sections that almost no one goes into anymore, and I found this." She took out a crumpled sheet of paper and placed it on the table. Santiago took the paper with trembling hands. "This is a transfer order," he said, feeling his stomach churn, and nodded. "Exactly. Your daughter was taken out of the hospital a few months after she was admitted." Camila's eyes widened. "And where did they take her?" Isabel bit her lips nervously. "That's what scares me. It says here that she was transferred to another psychiatric clinic." Camila's heart began to beat fast, and after that, Isabel looked directly at her with eyes full of a harsh truth. "After that, there are no more records." Silence filled the room. Camila felt a chill run down her spine. "So what you're saying is that my mom never died, but they never saw her again?" Isabel nodded slightly. "If she's still alive." Santiago ran his hand over his face, feeling despair grow inside him. Salvador clenched his fists, holding back tears. Camila took a deep breath, trying to control the tremor in her voice. "We have to find her." Salvador looked at her with eyes full of emotion. "We'll do it together." Santiago opened his mouth to speak, but his voice broke. He knew he had to go, that he had to be by her side in this search. But part of him felt he didn't have that right. "Go without me," he said, his voice choked with emotion. Camila frowned. "What?" Santiago looked at her with pain in his eyes. "I caused this. I was responsible for everything. The last thing Helena needs is to see me after so many years." Camila took a deep breath, not knowing what to feel, but deep down, she knew he was right. Santiago lowered his head, letting the tears run silently down his face. "Bring my daughter back," Camila said. She held back her tears and nodded. The next day, she and Salvador set out. The search for Elena began, and time was their worst enemy. Camila and Salvador traveled for hours, following every clue they found, every little trace that could lead them to Helena. Their fear grew with every kilometer they traveled, but their hope was even greater when they arrived at the town indicated in the old documents. The place seemed forgotten by time, with empty streets, few houses, everything shrouded in a strange silence. The clinic they were looking for was on top of a hill, far from everything. The building was old, with worn walls and windows covered with heavy curtains. There was no sign indicating that the place was still in operation. Salvador stopped the car in front of the rusty iron gate. He and Camila looked at each other. Her heart was beating so hard that she felt it was going to burst out of her chest. "Ready?" Salvador asked, his voice trembling. She took a deep breath and nodded. "I have to be." They pushed the gate, which creaked loudly in the morning silence. As they entered the courtyard, they saw a woman in a white uniform coming out the front door. "Can I help you?" the nurse asked, frowning. Camila felt a lump in her throat. "We're looking for Elena Ortega." The woman's expression changed immediately. "Who are you?" "I'm her daughter," Camila replied without hesitation, "and he's the man she loved." The nurse was silent for a few seconds, then looked back as if she were deciding something. "Follow me." Every step inside that place was a weight on Camila's shoulders. The strong smell of medicine and disinfectant turned her stomach. The lights were dim, and the narrow corridors gave the feeling that time had stopped inside. The nurse stopped in front of a door at the end of the hallway. "It's here." Camila's legs were shaking. Salvador took her hand, squeezing it gently, trying to give her strength. The nurse opened the door slowly. The room was small and simple, with a bed at the back and a window covered with a thin curtain. Sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, was Elena. Camila's heart almost stopped. Her mother was alive, but she looked like a ghost of her former self. Her hair was long and lifeless. Her eyes were lost in a fixed point, as if the world around her did not exist. There was a deep sadness in her expression. an invisible mark of suffering. Salvador took a step forward, but his voice failed him. Helena blinked slowly, as if the name took a while to make sense. When she looked up, her dark eyes met his. Camila's chest tightened. "Mom, it's me." Elena looked at her, blinking several times. There was something there, a confusion, a struggle within her own mind. Then, in a faint voice, as if searching for something far away, Helena whispered, "Camila." Tears ran down Camila's face. She didn't think, she didn't hesitate. Her body moved on its own, driven by an emotion she had never felt before. Tears already falling from her eyes as she ran forward and threw herself into her mother's arms. Helena hesitated, her thin, fragile body trembling as she felt her daughter's strong embrace. For a second, she didn't react. It was as if her body didn't know how to respond to that contact, as if her mind couldn't believe what was happening. But then a sob escaped her lips, and her arms, uncertain at first, finally wrapped around Camila. "Mom," Camila's voice broke between sobs. "I thought I would never find you." Helena closed her eyes, and tears began to fall silently. Her face was resting on her daughter's shoulder, and she hugged her as if she were afraid she would disappear. Salvador watched the scene with eyes full of tears and trembling hands. For years, he had dreamed of this moment, but now, seeing Elena so fragile, something inside broke inside him. Elena was crying, but it wasn't just tears of emotion, it was fear. She took Camila's face in both hands, her dark eyes wide open, filled with a desperation that her daughter didn't understand. "You shouldn't be here." Camila frowned in surprise. Elena looked around as if she expected someone to appear and take her away. "They're coming back. They won't allow it." Camila's heart raced. "Who, Mom? Who did this to you?" Elena trembled, her breathing heavy, her small body shrinking from the fear that overwhelmed her. "I tried to escape. I tried, but they always find me." Camila took her hands, trying to calm her. "No one is going to hurt you. I promise." Elena shook her head quickly. "You don't understand." Salvador approached slowly, his voice soft and full of love. "Helena, I'm here." She turned to him, and her eyes shone with a mixture of surprise and pain. Salvador smiled, his eyes filled with tears. "Yes, my love, I never forgot you." Elena's face contorted, and a sob, trapped for years, exploded in her throat. She brought her hands to her chest as if her heart hurt. It can't be true." Salvador knelt in front of her and took her trembling hands. "We're going to get you out of here. You're going back home." Elena closed her eyes and let more tears fall. Camila squeezed her hand tightly. "You're not alone anymore, Mom." Helena opened her eyes, and for a moment, a small sparkle appeared in them. She was still afraid, still hurt, but for the first time in years, she was not lost. Elena sat on the edge of the bed, still trembling, her thin fingers squeezing Camila's tightly, as if she were afraid her daughter would disappear. Salvador's face was tense, his eyes fixed on her, waiting for the words that had been trapped inside her for years. Camila wiped the tears from her face and took a deep breath. "Mom, tell me everything. What happened to you?" Elena looked away as if reliving it would be torture. For years, she had carried that story alone, with no one to listen to her, no one who could understand. But now her daughter was there. The man she loved was there. Maybe she could finally talk. She swallowed hard before beginning, her voice coming out weak, like an echo from a painful past. "After I left home, I was lost. I had nowhere to go. I wanted to find you, Salvador, but all they told me was that you didn't want to see me, that you had moved on with your life." Salvador closed his eyes, holding back tears. "It was a lie, Helena." She nodded, feeling her chest ache. "I know now, but back then I didn't know. I was alone with a daughter to raise and a lot of sadness inside me." Camila squeezed her hands tighter. What happened next? Elena took a deep breath, as if she needed courage to continue. "I met some people who welcomed me, who said they understood my pain, but while I was down, they led me down the wrong path." She looked down, ashamed. "One night I tried something. Drugs. I just wanted to forget for a moment. I just wanted to let go, feeling that pain inside me, that emptiness." Camila felt a lump in her throat. "Mom, Elena closed her eyes, letting a tear fall. It was only once, but it was enough. Salvador frowned. Enough for what? She looked at him, her eyes full of sadness. Someone turned me in. Someone called the hospital. They said I was out of control, that I was a danger to my own daughter. Camila brought her hands to her mouth in surprise. They took me against my will. Elena's voice broke. They drugged me. They locked me up. They told me I would never get out of there. Salvador stood up and began pacing back and forth, trying to contain his rage. You're not crazy. You were just a wounded young woman. Elena closed her eyes and shook her head, but no one wanted to listen. Camila wiped away the tears that wouldn't stop falling. Who did this to you, Mom? Elena hesitated. I never knew, but someone wanted to erase me. Someone wanted me to never come back. Salvador knelt in front of her and held her face in his hands. But we found you. She looked at him, her eyes still full of pain. But there's something left of me to save. Camila knelt beside her and took her hand. Yes, Mom. We're going to take you home. Helena trembled. I don't know how to go back. Camila wiped the tears from her mother's face and whispered, Then we'll learn together for the first time, after so many years of darkness. Elena didn't feel alone. Santiago looked at the phone on his desk, but his hands were shaking so much he couldn't pick it up. Since Camila and Salvador left, his heart had found no peace. The fear that it was too late consumed him inside. He spent his days at the hospital, but he could no longer concentrate on his work. His body was there, but his mind was elsewhere, in the past. The last time he saw Elena crying, running away from home, in the pain in Camila's eyes when she discovered the truth, in the years of loneliness trying to convince himself that he had done the best for his daughter, when in reality, he had only destroyed her. And then, his phone rang. He answered immediately, his heart racing. Dr. Santiago. It was Isabel, the nurse. They had found Elena. The air disappeared from his lungs. Where? How is she? Isabel hesitated before answering. She's alive, but she has suffered a lot. Santiago's hands trembled. I need to see her. He grabbed his car keys and left the hospital like a man who needed to correct the worst mistake of his life. When he arrived at the secluded clinic, he saw Camila and Salvador with a thin woman with long hair and a lost look in her eyes. His knees almost gave way. Elena. His heart beat strangely. Guilt crushed him so hard that he felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. She looked up, and then he saw her. Santiago held his breath. The daughter he had destroyed was standing in front of him, but she didn't smile. She didn't run into his arms. She just looked at him, as if she were seeing a ghost. Santiago's chest tightened. A sharp pain invaded him. The air became heavy. His vision darkened, and then everything collapsed. He fell to his knees, clutching his chest, trying to breathe, but the air wouldn't come. Salvador shouted when he saw him fall. Camila turned around instantly, and when she saw Santiago on the ground, her heart raced. Santiago ran towards him, but he was already on the ground, pale, with tears in his eyes, and his hand on his chest. I don't have much time left, he whispered. Camila's eyes filled with tears. She didn't know what to do. The anger inside her was still there, but at that moment, she couldn't let him die alone. She took his hand and squeezed it tightly. Hang in there. We're going to help you. Tears ran down Santiago's face as the pain increased. Forgive me, Elena. Elena looked at him with a mixture of resentment and compassion. But before she could say anything, Santiago lost consciousness. Camila held his face with both hands, desperate. No, don't leave me. They put him in the car and rushed to the hospital. The hospital room was silent, except for the sound of the machines monitoring Santiago's heartbeat. The dim light illuminated his pale face, his tired eyes that now seemed to carry the weight of his entire life. Camila sat next to the bed, holding his fragile hand. Her eyes were red from crying so much. She didn't know what to feel. For years, she believed she would never meet her family. And then when she found Santiago, the only thing she felt was anger. Now, seeing him there, weak and helpless, made her heart ache in a way she couldn't explain. Santiago slowly opened his eyes and looked at Camila. She squeezed his hand tighter. I'm here. He took a deep breath with difficulty. Every word seemed to require enormous effort. Forgive me, Camila, he said. A tear ran down his cheek. I was wrong. His voice trembled. I was wrong about Elena. I was wrong about you. The tears fell faster. I know. Santiago tried to raise his hand, but he didn't have the strength. He just looked at Camila with eyes full of tears. I would do everything differently if I could go back in time. Camila sobbed. Her chest was tight. Her heart seemed to be breaking, but she couldn't. The silence between them was heavy. She could feel his cold hand in hers. She could see the pain in his eyes, the guilt he had carried for so many years. She didn't need to say anything else. She knew he was sorry, and in that moment she realized she couldn't change the past. But she could choose not to carry the hatred into the future. She cried, shaking her head slowly. I can't forget what you did. Santiago's eyes filled with tears. I know, but I can let go of the anger. His voice was weak, but sincere. Santiago closed his eyes for a moment, and when he opened them again, a different look appeared in them. Relief. The monitor next to his bed showed that his heartbeat was weak. With each passing second, his strength diminished, but he no longer seemed to be fighting it. Camila still held his hand. Different look appeared in them. Relief. The monitor next to his bed showed that his heartbeat was weak. With each passing second, his strength diminished, but he no longer seemed to be fighting it. Camila still held his hand. Her face was wet with tears, but now there was something different in her gaze. The anger she had carried for so long was disappearing, leaving room for something new, something she didn't fully understand, but knew she needed to feel. Elena was by his side, still fragile, still scared, but there, after so many years, she was facing the man who had made her suffer, and now she saw him as he really was, a broken man consumed by guilt. Santiago slowly opened his eyes. His gaze met Helena's, and his mouth trembled slightly. My daughter, he whispered. Elena pressed her lips together, her eyes shining with held-back tears. I waited years to hate you, she whispered, but now that I'm here, I can only feel sadness. Santiago tried to raise his hand, and although with difficulty, Helena held it. I never stopped loving you, Elena murmured. She closed her eyes, letting the tears fall. Santiago turned his head toward Camila and tried to smile for the first time in many years. He seemed at peace. You look so much like her, Camila said, squeezing his hand. You're going to be okay. He took a deep breath, and a single tear rolled down his tired face. I'm already fine. And then his eyes closed. The monitor beside him beeped slowly until it stopped. Camila felt time slow down. Elena let out a trembling sigh, bringing her hand to her mouth, her small body shrinking into silent tears. Santiago was gone, but this time he was gone in peace. The sky was gray on the day of the funeral. The wind blew gently, moving the leaves of the trees around the small cemetery. The sound of the footsteps of the few people who were there mingled with the crunch of dry leaves on the ground. Camila stood in front of the closed coffin without saying anything. Her chest felt heavy, as if a part of her were trapped in that moment, unable to move forward. Santiago was gone. She didn't know exactly how she felt. It wasn't pure sadness like when she lost her mother and grew up not knowing where she was. Nor was it anger, because that pain was already gone. It was an emptiness, a deep silence. Santiago was a man who made mistakes. He made so many mistakes that he destroyed everything around him, but in the end, he tried to fix what he could. He tried to find a little peace. Elena was by her side, holding her own hands to try to control the trembling. Her gaze was lost, as if even she didn't know how to feel at that moment. I don't know what to say, she whispered after a while. Camila looked at her mother and saw the same confusion she felt. I don't think you need to say anything. The earth was thrown onto the coffin slowly. Each shovel of earth was like the closing of a cycle, the end of a story full of pain, but one that somehow needed to end. Salvador put a hand on Camila's shoulder and squeezed it lightly, as if to tell her without words that she was not alone. When it was over, the few people present began to leave one by one. Camila stayed a moment longer, looking at the freshly covered grave. Her heart was not light, but it no longer carried the weight it had borne for so long. She took a deep breath for the first time in a long time and felt that she could move on. The lawyer's office was silent, only the sound of the clock on the wall echoing in the room. Camila, Elena, and Salvador were sitting side by side, waiting. None of the three knew exactly what to expect at that moment. The lawyer opened a leather folder and took out 2 envelopes. He placed them on the table carefully, as if he knew the weight those letters carried. Santiago Valdez made his will the day before he died. In addition to his material possessions, he left these letters, one for Camila and one for Elena. Camila looked at the envelope in front of her. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. Elena remained paralyzed. She did not touch her letter, but only looked at it as if it were a ghost from the past. Camila took a deep breath before opening her envelope. She ran her fingers over the paper and then began to read. Camila, I don't know if you will ever be able to forgive me. I don't know if I deserve for you to read this letter from a man who made so many mistakes and denied you so many truths. But if you are reading it, it means that I am no longer here, and that at least in some way I left you what I should have told you in life. Everything I did was wrong. I destroyed your mother. I destroyed Salvador. I destroyed you without even knowing you existed. I spent my life justifying my mistakes with excuses I made up myself. But now, facing death, I see things as they are. But there is something that is not a lie. In these few days I knew you. I felt something inside me that I hadn't felt in a long time. The love I feel for you is real. You are my granddaughter. And even though I wasn't present in your life, I hope that someday you can remember me, not only for the I did wrong, but for what I tried to fix. Move on. Be happy. Santiago Valdez. Tears fell silently down Camila's face. She folded the letter carefully and held it close to her chest. Helena had not yet opened hers. Mama Elena stared at the envelope as if it weighed a ton. Her chest rose and fell rapidly. Salvador put his hand on hers and finally had the courage to open it. The letter was long. The first words made her hands tremble. My daughter, you will never know how much it hurts me to write these words. I spent my whole life running away from them, running away from everything I did to you, from the damage I caused, from the scars I left on your heart. Now I know there is no more time, and all I have left is to ask for your forgiveness. Helena, I always loved you. I loved you the day I held you in my arms for the first time, when you were still a baby, and you became my daughter. I loved you when you learned to walk, when you fell off your bike and cried in fear, when you called me Dad for the first time. But I was young, I was foolish. I thought I knew what was best for you, and in wanting to protect you, I destroyed you. I should never have separated you from Salvador. I should never have said those horrible words in our last fight. You were always my daughter, and there was not a single day in my life when I did not thought about you. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but if one day you can, I want you to know that I loved you until my last breath. Be happy, my girl. Forever your father. Elena's hands began to shake so much that the letter slipped from her fingers. The crying came uncontrollably, loud, a scream. Trapped by years of suffering, Salvador held her before she collapsed. She rested her head on his chest and cried. Camila took her mother's hand and squeezed it. Helena sobbed. He loved me. He loved me. Camila stroked her mother's hair. I always loved you, Mom. The past could not be erased. The pain would not disappear overnight. But at that moment, a wound began to heal. The days passed slowly. After Santiago's funeral, and the letters that left wounds and healing at the same time, Elena needed time. Time to understand that the world was no longer that cold room in the clinic. Time to accept that the past hurt, but that the present gave her a new opportunity. Camila watched her mother trying to rebuild herself in the early days. Elena spent long moments in silence, looking out the window as if she still couldn't believe she was free. But then small gestures began to appear. One morning, Camila woke up and found Elena sitting at the table, drinking coffee. It was a simple gesture, but for so many years she had been locked in a world where no one treated her like a real person. You woke up early, Camila said, smiling as she sat down next to her. Elena looked up, and for the first time, smiled back. I felt like watching the sunrise. Camila took her hand on the table. It makes me happy that you're here. Elena took a deep breath, and with a discreet gleam in her eyes, murmured, Me too. Every day she talked a little more, telling little stories from when she was young, memories that had previously seemed locked inside her. And then, Salvador. He never pressured her, never tried to rush her. He was just there. At first, Elena avoided looking at him for long, not because she didn't recognize him, but because Salvador was proof of everything she had lost. But he was always there. He brought her flowers and asked her simple questions, as if to help her remember that life could be lighthearted. Until one day, sitting on the terrace of Camila's house, Helena sighed and looked at him. "You haven't changed that much." Salvador smiled, surprised that she spoke first. "A few more wrinkles," he joked, "but the heart is still the same." Elena looked away thoughtfully. "I missed you." Those words made Salvador's eyes fill with tears. He took her hand gently, as if holding something precious. "I've been looking for you my whole life." She squeezed his hand softly. "I know." And for the first time in more than 20 years, Elena felt that maybe she could still love. Camila watched her mother sitting in the garden, the soft sun illuminating her hair, while Salvador told a story from the past. They laughed, not that loud, exaggerated laugh, but a true, shy laugh, like someone rediscovering what happiness is. She hugged herself and took a deep breath. For so long, she had dreamed of having a family, of understand where she came from, to fill the void inside her. Now, finally, she was no longer alone. Her mother was alive. Her father never gave up. And despite everything, Santiago, with all his mistakes, ultimately loved his daughter and granddaughter as best he could. The pain of the past was still there, and perhaps it would never completely disappear. But Camila felt that something inside her was changing every day. That night, sitting on the bed with her mother's diary in her hands, she reread the words that had brought her there, the words Elena had written when she still believed she would never have a second chance. She slowly closed the notebook and looked up at the ceiling. This can't happen to anyone else. Camila understood that she had traveled a path that many other women never had the opportunity to complete. Her mother was hospitalized against her will, silenced, forgotten, treated like a problem that had to be erased. But she survived, and how many others did not? The next day, without thinking twice, Camila went to a university and filled out an application form. "Medicine?" asked the receptionist curiously. Camila smiled. "I want to save people and make sure that no one else suffers what my mother suffered." She left with a piece of paper in her hand and certainty in her heart. Her family's story did not end in pain. It ended in hope. The wind blew gently that morning. The sky was cloudy, and the silence of the cemetery felt even deeper. Camila walked slowly between the tombstones, holding a single white flower between her fingers. Her heart was beating fast, as if she were about to say something she never had the courage to say. When she stopped in front of Santiago's grave, she stood there quietly, just looking at the tombstone. It was simple, with his name engraved in discreet letters. Santiago Valdés, the man who made so many wrong decisions, the man who caused so much pain, but also the man who, in the end, tried to redeem himself. Camila took a deep breath. "I thought you would never come here." Her own voice sounded low in the silence. She lowered her gaze, looking at the damp earth in front of the grave. For so long, she had held a grudge against him for everything he had done to her mother, for separating her from her father, for denying her existence. But now, things felt different. She still didn't. "If I have completely forgiven you," she continued, her voice breaking, but somehow I understood. Camila felt her eyes fill with tears. "You were never a monster. You were just a man who was afraid, a man who made mistakes." She smiled slightly, sadly, but sincerely. "And despite everything, I loved you, Grandpa." A single tear rolled down her cheek. She bent down and placed the white flower on the gravestone. "Rest in peace." The wind blew a little stronger, ruffling her hair. Camila closed her eyes for a moment and took a deep breath. When she opened them again, she knew that the past was finally at peace. Camila left the cemetery feeling her heart lighter. The cold wind touched her face, but for the first time in a long time, the weight inside her seemed lighter. The past hurt, but now it was a memory, something that no longer bound her, something she could carry without it weighing her down. She walked slowly through the streets, observing the people around her, watching life go on. She wanted to move on, too. When she got home, she found Elena on the terrace, sitting in a chair, drinking tea. Her mother looked different, still fragile but alive. "How did it go?" Elena asked. Looking at her daughter, Camilla smiled slightly and sat down next to her. "I said everything I needed to say." Elena looked at Camilla tenderly, not something she couldn't see. For the first time in a long time, there was peace in her daughter's eyes. The night was silent, and the light from the lamp illuminated Elena's room. She was sitting on the bed with the old diary open on her lap. The yellowed pages were marked by time, laden with memories, pain, and secrets. For years, that diary had been her only refuge, the only place where she could tell her story without fear. But now things were different. She looked at the desk where Camilla had left her new college register. Her daughter was following a path that would give meaning to all the pain they had experienced. On the other side of the room, Salvador slept on the sofa as if he didn't want to be away from her for a second. After so many years apart, they were finally together again. Elena picked up the pen and took a deep breath. The last time she wrote there, she thought her story would end in loneliness. But now there was something new. She ran her hand over the blank page and began to write. "I spent years trying to understand why life took so much from me, why they took my love away, why my voice was silenced, why my daughter grew up without me. Today, I see that love was never lost. It just waited for the right moment to find me again. Camila found me." Salvador never gave up, and despite all the damage Santiago did, he tried to redeem himself. "The past still hurts, but now it no longer binds me. I have a future. I have my daughter. I have a love that survived time. And most importantly, now I know that love always finds a way." Elena carefully closed the diary and ran her hand over the worn cover. Then she took a deep breath and smiled. Her story was no longer about pain. It was about a new beginning. Camila was sitting on the terrace of her house with her mother's diary open on her lap. The night breeze blew gently, moving her hair as her eyes scanned the last words Elena had written. "Love always finds a way." She slowly ran her hand over the page, feeling the weight of each word. That diary held a story of pain, loss, and silence, but also of reunions, love, and forgiveness. She remembered everything she had experienced since she woke up in that hospital with no memory, calling a stranger grandfather. It seemed like a lifetime ago, but in reality only a few months had passed, months that had changed everything. Now his mother was free, his father was by his side, and Santiago was gone. But he had left something he never imagined he would find: a sincere request for forgiveness. She closed the diary slowly and hugged it to her chest. The past hurt like an open wound that seemed to never heal. But now it didn't hurt in the same way. She stood up and looked at the dark sky. The stars were shining high above, and for the first time in a long time, she felt she no longer carried that weight alone. The past made her who she was, but the future was in her hands. The sun was beginning to set on the horizon, painting the sky with golden and orange tones. Camila walked slowly through the park, feeling the soft breeze touch her face. Beside her, Helena and Salvador walked together, as if time had never separated them. Elena delicately held Salvador's arm, as if she were still getting used to his presence, as if she needed to remind herself that all of this was real. He, for his part, looked at her with silent affection, a love that had withstood time, pain, and separation. Camila watched them and felt a warmth grow inside her chest. For years, she had lived with a part of herself incomplete. She had searched for answers, pursued a past that had always been denied her. Now the past was resolved, and the future was beginning before her eyes. They passed by a small lake where some children were playing near the water. Elena stopped for a moment, watching them with a slight smile. "I wonder what my life would have been like if none of this had happened," she said with a melancholy tone in her voice. Salvador gently squeezed her hand. "Don't think about what could have been. Think about what we can still experience." She looked at him, and her eyes, which for so many years had carried fear and sadness, now shone with hope. Camila smiled when she saw this scene. They had a new opportunity. She took both their hands and, among the waves, said, "It doesn't matter how much time we lost. What matters is that we are here now, together." Elena took a deep breath and nodded, squeezing her daughter's hand. Salvador smiled and looked up at the sky as if giving thanks for finally having his family back. Camila closed her eyes for a second, letting the breeze touch her face. For the first time in her life, she felt complete. Would you forgive them if you were in their shoes? Write your comments below. Thank you for watching. If you liked our story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Share our stories with your loved ones. A new story comes every day.